Shadows creep around us, silent whispers call. In the dark we wander, lost within it all. My air is heavy, breaths that freeze the soul. Echoes in the distance, stories left untold. Whispers of the night, drawing near and tight. Secrets in the shadows, hidden from the light.
Hey there, true believers. Ricky and I had so much to talk about in this episode, it actually ended up being a 2 hour long discussion. And unfortunately, I had to break it up into 2 episodes. So I hope you enjoyed the first episode enough that you'll tune in and watch part 2. Thank you. Hey there, true believers. This is Robert. We're back with another episode of Monstrous. Hope everybody is doing well. We've got Mr. Ricardo Sanchez, and he's out of Tennessee. And let's dive into this. Let him introduce himself. Mr. Rick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad to have you on here, sir. If you don't care, would you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Go into as much detail as you want.
So when I started with the Dogman, I was a correctional officer in the state of Wisconsin for a maximum security prison. I'm also a dog trainer. I still am a dog trainer. We train dogs for multi purposes. And I love the outdoors. I've always had a fascination for cryptids, and strange animals and strange discoveries. So through the years, that's always been my passion. Bigfoots and stuff like that. Um, and I guess that is what started my desire to learn about things back when I was younger. But obviously, life gets in the way, so you become an adult, and adult things take over. So even though you may watch a show here and there, you really don't do much investigation. I think that the reason I started really diving into investigation when it comes to Dogman was because I became an eyewitness in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, so if you don't care, if you would, tell us about your first eyewitness incident, your encounter, and again, start from the beginning, go into as much detail as you want to.
So the first encounter was, you would say it. I couldn't say definitely that this is what it was until you started putting the pieces together. So we always buy bottled water from Walmart and whatnot, and it was one night. I'm gonna say probably 8, 9 o'clock at nighttime. I'm walking outside towards the car to grab those big containers of water, and I open the trunk. And as I'm looking around, opening them, trying to take it off, the back, I see eye shine behind me, and the eye shine is coming towards me. I thought at the beginning, again, not thinking about cryptids, I thought it was one of the stray cats that was on the property, because the property that we lived in was a total of 3 acres, and it was just surrounded by cornfields. Um, so I kept on, taking the things out the trunk, put them on the floor because we had several of them in the trunk. So I just continued to put them on the floor so I can close the trunk. And once in a while, I would look back and see that the eye shine was coming closer and closer. And again, I'm thinking cat. I'm not thinking anything else. But something all of a sudden told me, why would the stray cat be walking towards you? Because it's a stray cat and it wouldn't want to be next to you. So I kind of turned around and looked at it, and it stopped. And at that moment, it was squatted down. And I took probably a step or two probably towards it, and it backtracked while still looking at me. went in reverse, just like a cat would. Hence why I was thinking it was probably the stray cat. And it went backwards. And then, so I went back towards the trunk, closed the trunk, and I'm still trying to figure out, is this the stray cat? Is this not the stray cat? What is this? Because it's like it wants to come towards me, but it's watching my movement. And so I remember having a headlamp on me, and it wasn't that powerful, but it was staying far away from the actual light. And I remember going towards it and it scooting backwards, but still looking at me. So at one point, I'm saying to myself, okay, what is this? Because every time I would turn around, it would come forward a little bit. So I turned around and I walked towards it, and it walked straight back while squatted down, right? Just like a cat, right? Squatted back towards a tree while still looking at me, and then turned around, and now the eyes were probably about 5 or 6 feet tall. Like it had turned around and I'm assuming stood up, and grabbed the tree. So I walked more towards it because now I have the curiosity, like what is this? And as I walked towards the tree, it climbed the tree, and you can hear parts of the branches breaking off as it climbed up, and it perched itself like on top of that tree. Now that really sparked my curiosity because it was heavy enough to break certain branches off. So I went back towards the car, grabbed the containers. I grabbed 2 containers, grabbed them, put them inside the house, and I went back outside. And by then, the eye shine that had been on top of the tree were no longer there. So it had, climbed back down and left. And that was the end of that particular sighting. Certain things were weird, but I didn't think much of it, right? So that same week, I had bought something in Marketplace, on Facebook Marketplace, and I told my next door neighbor, hey, listen, would you let me borrow the truck or come with me to pick up this furniture? I'll give you gas, whatever, and we'll just chit chat and enjoy the day. So that's what we did. We went out, we talked, we had lunch, whatever, and at one point, me being funny, I said, hey, when you go outside at nighttime, watch it. There's something outside. And he looked at me with those eyes like, what did you just say? And, I told him, well, the other day, and I told him what happened with me. And then he tells me that a couple of days prior, after my situation, he had gone on the trail. Now, we lived close by to the Horicon Marsh. It's a very large marsh area. There's a trail where we lived. The trail is probably a quarter of a mile down from our house, and that trail leads directly into the marsh. It's a very long trail. Wisconsin has many trails that are miles upon miles upon miles of just the trail. They're usually bike trails. There used to be some of them used to be old railroad tracks that they covered over. But anyways, so he tells me he went on that trail, and he was talking to his wife. Assumingly they were having a discussion, not an argument, but they were discussing something important, and they had gone that trail. And then on their way back home, they began to hear something paralleling them on their right side. And as they were walking, it was walking side by side with them. And what he was telling me is that he would hear the heavy breathing. So his wife got scared. And they were Christians, so his wife told him to stop and do a prayer. So they stopped, prayed, and continued down the path to go back home. Whatever was there continued to parallel them. When they got to the asphalt, to the pavement, and started their home stretch back towards the house on the road, he says that he would hear click, 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 click on the pavement. And then that made him turn around with his flashlight and flash it into the tree line. So he describes that he saw 5 sets of eye shine. 4 of them were your amberish color, and then one of them was red. So I'm thinking, oh, it was probably coyotes following him or something, right? Now, there are reports in the Horicon Marsh of wolves, me and my wife did see one wolf one day, so I know they're there. Um, but again, I'm thinking normal animals. And I asked him, hey, listen, how tall, how high up were these eye sharks? So then he says, about 6 or 7 feet tall off the ground. Then I'm like, well, owls don't normally congregate right together, and coyotes and wolves aren't 7 feet tall. So then he began to describe um, weird, because they started doing vocalizations. And within the vocalizations, he said they started laughing. And I'm like, laughing? That's kind of weird. And then he described it as hyena type laugh, which is even more because this is Wisconsin. So I went to YouTube and I looked up your typical Bigfoot noise, right? Because again, at that moment in time, I'm thinking, probably there's Bigfoot, you know? There are reports in the Horicon Wash of Bigfoots. So I gave him the audio from YouTube, and he goes, "No, it wasn't that." And at that time, we were eating, and so I went into the North American Dogman Project website, and there's one from Dayton. I think that's how you say it.
Oh yeah.
So I gave that recording, and when I gave that recording, you can physically see him getting goosebumps. Looks at me and says, "That was it. That's what I heard." My brain switched. I'm like, oh crap! Like, do you even know what that is? Like, no, what is that? And I'm like, well, that's a dogman. Now he doesn't know what a dogman is, right? He just like what he even actually asked me what is a dogman. So I try to explain to him, right? And I'm new to the whole dogman thing, right? I know Bigfoots and I know other cryptids, but not dogman. And then but he kept on saying about the laughter. So that went on to back burner. It's like so we went home, we got home, whatever, and my brain's like dogman in the area, darn it. But this is like cornfields. The corn is not even tall. You know, again, why are they around? Um, so then the following week, whenever it was a holiday, the trash would come a day earlier or a day later. Um, Whenever that it was a holiday. So I remember that day. I believe it was a day later. The trash came, and I wasn't working that day. In corrections, we have either Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, or we have Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. So I remember that day to be Thursday. The trash was supposed to be there on Wednesday. So he leaves. He normally left for work around 2:30. So he left. He went to work. I was there home all day, and I don't know. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he comes rushing around the house, calling my name, trying to find me. So when he got to me, he's like out of breath. You can tell that he's emotionally, his heart's racing. He's been anxious all day. He needed to talk to me. He needed to get this off his chest. So when he gets to me, he says, "I saw it. I saw it. I saw it this morning." Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? That thing, the dog man. It's like, okay, what? So he begins to explain to me. So he puts his trash in the back of his pickup truck and drives up the driveway. The driveway is like an H. So you come up one driveway. That driveway ends in the side of my house. Then if you go back, it goes like an H. And the other side of the driveway ends up at his end of his house. Um, so he's telling me that he put the trash in the back of his pickup truck. He went forward towards the beginning of the road, took his trash can out and placed it in front of the road. But as he's doing that, he's seeing that his lights of his pickup truck are flickering. But he's thinking probably a coyote or something, or whatever. So he's not putting much attention to it. He goes back to the pickup truck, grabs his trash, puts it again because he has, I think, 2 or 3 trash bags or whatever, and he puts it in front of the road. And when he turns around and is going to the pickup truck, this thing walks in front of the pickup truck. So now they're both facing each other. The front paws never touched the ground, but it was squatted enough where you can say his front paws were just hovering over the ground. And it just stared at him. And he slowly sidestepped into his pickup truck and got in and sped out, left. Um, so he begins to explain to me how he saw his build and stuff like that. Um, and that began, I guess, the confirmation that okay, what we were seeing is this, right? Because prior we were seeing eye shine, noises, right? That's it. But now we had a visual confirmation that this was what was on the property. Um, and that started probably a whole year of activities I'm going to say every weekend, and then it went to every other weekend. They would come around. We had multiple situations and scenarios in the property, then coming around. I remember one day I was taking out my dogs, and I let my bulldog go, and my bulldog ran straight to the door because that's his routine. He knows he's going to go eat. So once he opened the kennel, he would run, straight towards the front door. And I remember that as I let him go and I'm walking back towards the house, I'm looking forward and I see two big eyeballs um, over the mailbox. Now the mailbox is slightly under the level of the pavement. It's on dirt, right? But it's the pole is on the dirt, so it's lower than the level of the road. Um, and so when I put the dog in, closed him inside, I went back. It was no longer there. So I went towards the mailbox. So then I'm seeing, okay, the ice line was over here. If he was standing in the ditch, he's going to be about 7.5 feet tall. If he's standing on the pavement, then he must have been squatted. And this thing sitting down, his eyeballs were well over 4.5 feet. Um, so then I began to walk back towards the house, and this is where things get interesting. Um, the when I went to towards the house, there's some bushes on my right side, and there's a gap between those bushes. And it was a clear night. You had the reflections of the lights, and I see the head with the movement, and it's on the other side of the bushes. And I stopped. And when I stopped, don't ask me why I did this, right? Because I don't know to this day what went through my head to do this. But I started whimpering like a little puppy wanting to play with a adult. And I remember that it stopped, put his nose like through that gap, and began to cock his head to the sides as he looked at me. And I remember my brain saying, "Oh, you know what that means." And it stuck his head back and started walking again. So now I wanted to get my other headlamp on, and I got my other headlamp on. I went back, towards the bushes. It was still behind the bushes, but now it was just not allowing me um, access to seeing him. Right? You can hear him move behind the whole bushes and things, but I couldn't see him. But I didn't want to press my situation, so I went back inside with that in my mind. Like this guy or girl understood the vocalizations of a puppy wanting to play with an adult dog. A couple of days later, probably I won't say days, probably a week or so later, there was a house fire in the apartment that we lived. Um, and I won't go into details of how that happened, but um, that week my parents were coming over, so I had to take out the vinyl floor, take out the cabinets, and do a whole bunch of remodeling in that kitchen. And that's what we started doing on my day off. I stripped the floor, took the cabinets out, scraped the floor, prepped it for the new floor, all in a couple of hours. Um, and I went outside, and this is where things get interesting. I went outside to get my utility knife to cut the edges of the vinyl floor against the walls, and I can't find it. And my wife goes and says, "It's in the cabinet that you just took out." So, okay, cool. Now, to give you a scenario of what the back door looks like, the back door is a sliding glass door. There is no lights on the back. So the only light that I have, or reflection that I have towards the back, is simply the kitchen light that's on, right? And the curtain is to the side, so that reflects out. I went out, and when I was getting to that cabinet, I looked down and I saw the utility knife that I had, and this strong emotion of dread came over me. Like this imminent death is going to befall you in any second. And I grab the sides of the cabinet, and I'm trying to shake this thing off, this feeling, this emotion. And I look up, look to the side. Moment in time, I didn't see nothing, but this feeling is so strong. All of a sudden, I look forward in front of me, and there's a figure walking towards me. So my instinct said, "Turn around. There has to be one behind you." Sure enough, when I turned around, there was another figure at the opposite side of the house, only showing his face and probably part of his shoulder. So now my back is towards my house, trying to keep an eye out on the one that was in front of me that's now on my right side, and the one that was behind me that's now on my left side. But in doing that, now I'm facing the cornfields, and three others were coming out of the cornfields. I close my eyes and I'm like, okay, I can't do nothing because I have a child inside the house, and my wife's inside. If I yell for them, she's gonna come out, and the doors open, everything's gonna go south. So I can't call for them. The best thing is for me to do what I gotta do. If they take me out, it's me alone. They're safe. So I closed my eyes. I started talking to myself and towards them. Now, I want the listeners to understand that I wasn't talking towards them because I thought that they understood me. It was more of trying to control my emotions. Now, being a correctional officer, we've been in situations where it's 1 to 75 inmates, and we have to control our emotions when there's a fight going on, right? And I think that's what kind of helped me. And I remember saying in an audible, voice, not loud screaming, but more quiet talking to, like if I was talking to you right now, you know, back off. This is my house. And I said it probably about 2 or 3 times as I grabbed the utility knife. Obviously, I'm not going to win against five things with a utility knife. But at the moment in time, that's the only blade I had, right? And again, I said those words, back off, this is my house, probably about 2 or 3 times. When I became the neutral, I'm not backing away type of scenario, um, they quickly, well, I won't say quickly, but they began to stop and retreat back into the cornfields. The other one retreated back into the other cornfield, and the one that was inside of the house, I could not see him anymore. When I realized that they weren't no longer there, I opened the sliding door and I walked inside the house. And I sat down on the lip. So the sliding door is elevated. So once you slide the door to come in, you got to step down into the kitchen floor. So I sat down on that lip, and I'm trembling. Like my whole body is trembling. My wife is walking from the right side, which the bathroom was in the right side, and she's walking towards the bedroom. When she sees that I'm sitting down and I'm slightly trembling, and she looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And all I was able to say was, "Yeah, I'm just tired. I'm gonna go take a shower and I'll head to bed." And she gave me that stare and kind of, went to the bedroom. Um, but from that point on, started a whole shoe of learning, because this is my house, right? I have a child, I have a wife. Um, and I needed to learn how to live in harmony with them while living in there, because I wasn't going to go anywhere. Um, and again, that began a whole year of me attempting new things, going to the Horicon Marsh, looking for them. There is a place called the Neshki Mounds, also in Wisconsin, close by the marsh. And me and another coworker, um, not coworker, but co-researcher, went to, which we found them there. We heard more vocalizations, and understanding the surroundings and what happens prior and what happens after. You kind of put a pinpoint on where or what the vocalization means. Um, and that led me to visit, because it was funny. I had a dog club at my house that came in every Sunday, and the director of the clubhouse had Bigfoots and Dogman in her property, including what I guess what researchers call a Gudwig, in her property. So obviously, I had to go to her property to see this, and I got action. Let's just say that I got action, on that property. But that's what started my whole, interest, motivation, push into the Dogman world. I began like anybody else looking at podcasts and stuff like that. I remember going when I drove to work, because I worked at that time. I was probably a good 35 minutes to 40 minutes drive, to work. So I would put on, Dogman Encounters, and I would listen the half as I got to work, and then listen to the other half as I went back home. Um, but I couldn't find any information. It was more he said, she said. It was more of third party, telling their stories. And even though they were, firsthand, it was an eyewitness who saw something for a short period of time, but had no information. So I began to study those encounters with a notepad and pen, breaking everything down, going back and forth, and rehearing, what the eyewitness would say, the behaviors, and back and forth and back and forth. And I realized that there was a huge pattern to everything every eyewitness said. Um, and that were the first notes that I would get, into going into the field and say, okay, I want to try this, I want to try that. This happens, I want to try this one. And yeah, sure. Over the years, I've been surrounded several times. I got pushed out from areas. I've been walked from behind. Um, but it's all been, positive outcomes, because every time I go out on a specific investigation, we learn new things. Um, I think Tennessee was the first place that I ever, again, going back to the notes and, you know, going off curiosity and stuff like that. I remember, I remember that I was, in the kitchen and I was looking through Instagram, and this, reel came in, and in the reel there was a noise that animals produce. I don't want to say what the noise is, so people don't get the ideas. Um, so as I'm playing this audio, because it was a funny, my two chihuahuas that I had came from asleep and sat right next to me, wagging their tails and just looking at me like, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" And then my bulldog began to bark slash whine because his curiosity was sparked. And as I'm playing it back and forth and I'm seeing the response, well, guess what I had to do? I went to Walmart and bought myself a Bluetooth speaker. Came came back to Tennessee, to meet a researcher down here, and I told the researcher, well, you're gonna be with me when I start experimenting on this. And what do you mean? What do you mean? What you gonna do? So the first place that we went to, it was probably 11:30 at nighttime. I put the Bluetooth speaker on top of the car, the rental car, and I had these this sonic ear. It's like a bionic ear.
Right.
So I put that also on top of the car, and I had a long, earplug. So I gave her one earplug, and I gave put the other earplug. And don't ask me why I did the sequence that I did. Right? It
Hmm.
was just out. It was just out of the blue. But as I did the sequence, holy hell! Everything just woke up and ran towards us, just like the Chihuahuas woke up from their sleep and came to me. And we at first I'm looking forward and I'm seeing at that moment in time, I can't tell you if I was seeing a Bigfoot or a Dogman. But
Hmm.
later on we confirmed that it was a Dogman. They were going from right to left and from left to right. They were crossing the road. We were at a large park, and there was nobody there when we did this, and we were facing the exit. Although we had to drive a while to get out, but we were facing the road going towards the exit. And so she's looking, I'm looking, but I just shut up, because I'm saying to myself, am I seeing this right? Is this actually what I'm seeing? Am I seeing something going back and forth? Right? Which later on, I asked her, I, I, I asked her specifically, did you see anything in front of the car? And she goes, yeah, I was seeing this, and this. And okay, because I saw the same thing. But we heard coming from down the valley, there were one, two, there was one in front, one on the side, and one from behind. They were coming at high paces, and you can hear the howls, okay, as they were coming up, and you can hear the thunk thunk as they're rushing coming up, and then the big one, because you can hear the mass as it was going up from the valley up towards the parking lot. All I said was right, because now I'm like a little kid, right? Because holy crap, this actually worked, right? And I'm like, they're coming, and she gets nervous, but I'm like giggling like hell yeah, this is great. And I'm looking forward because I'm still looking at the things that were going back and forth in front of the car. So I cocked my head to the side, and the female researcher had her legs on top of the seat, cradling her knees with her head between her legs. And I looked at her and said, do you want to leave? And she goes, yeah, okay. So I lowered my window to grab the Bluetooth speaker, and she goes, what are you doing? Like, I gotta get my Bluetooth speaker. And the bionic is that's on top of the car. Well, hurry up. So I lowered the window, grabbed both things, put them inside, closed the window, and we left. Um, and then I think the day after, we came back and found the tracks um, of them, where we heard them. You could see as they ran up, they would leave the dirt mark. They would scrape off the leaves, right? And then you can see the print on the dirt. But that night, I did the vocalizations 4 times in 4 different places with 4 hits every time. And we would see rather eye shine because I had an IR night vision. So we would see eye shine, the same howls we saw at the other park or something, right? And this thing worked, and I kept it. That was my go-to. Later on, in talking to a good friend, researcher, he gives me some very gold information. And when he gives it to me, I go back to the four places that I did it on, and I realized that my vocalizations were exactly the type of topography and area that he had mentioned. Right, so it aligned with the gold nugget that he gave me with what the vocalizations I was doing. So obviously, I repeated that in multiple states. I did that to Illinois. We got 3 hits in Illinois. I've done that in Ohio. I've done that in Georgia, in Alabama. I mean, every spot that I've been on, I've done it, and you always get a hit because it works.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Um,
So you found a procedure that works, and you can repeat it scientifically.
every
You can repeat it, and you get a reaction.
every single time,
That's amazing. That really is. That's
every single
cool.
time. Um, there's not one time, even if the time frame is off, right? Because I gave the vocalization to a farmer in Wisconsin. Now I'm going to say a farmer in Wisconsin, but you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
He's close to the Brave Road area. Um, I gave him the same vocalization because I trusted him, and I told him, "Dude, do not give this to anybody." Right?
Right.
And so one night he was out, and I kind of messaged him, "Hey, did you ever use it?" "Well, no, we haven't used it yet. I'm going to use it tonight. I'm out here." And I looked at the time, and I'm like, "Well, it's still a little bit early, but you have the topography. 'Cause the time frame has to do with when they're at a particular area at nighttime in that topography, right? So their behavior throughout the U.S. is the same. Around this time, they have already done this, and they're going to go to do this.
Gotcha.
And when you hit the noise, you're interrupting what they're doing, so they come up to figure out what is this noise about. Um, so I told them, listen, you have the topography, but it's not time yet, just in case. But I think the next morning, I texted him. I messaged him on Messenger, and I told him, hey, did it work? What happened? And he goes, whoa, 10 minutes after I did the vocalization, they came in. So he got a hit off the first 10 minutes of doing the sequence and the vocalization. And this is a place where there's not a lot of woods, but the curiosity is so strong that they leave everything behind and they come to figure out what is it that's happening. And throughout the U.S., I've collected other vocalizations, other and their meanings, like "mom" from Wisconsin, from the director of our dog club. She recorded some things, and then I test those things out in other places because that's what I do, right? I grab vocalizations. Now, this is where putting audio out is very important because you can hear a vocalization if you're out and about, but that's all you hear. But if you put audio out and then you hear, for instance, in this case, mom will let out a particular type of vocalization that calls in the pups. Then mom stays still until the pups get there, right? Once the pups get there, then they move out. Now, how would I know, besides what the eyewitness has told me, that this is true? How can we confirm this? Because when we leave audio, like in northern Wisconsin, when we were up there for a 5-day investigation at a eyewitness house that she no longer lives there now, but she used to live there. In audio, what you hear is the vocalization from the other, Wisconsin eyewitness. Then once you hear that vocalization, you literally hear I'm going to call them pitter patters. Imagine a smaller dog running on the carpet, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you hear lighter pitter patters going towards where you kind of heard the vocalization, or going towards the vocalization, and then you hear those same pitter patters with a heavier pitter patter going away from the recorder.
Interesting.
So when you add, not when you add, but when you put things that when it says with audio in the field, and you do it as a zoologist versus anything else, you're able to pinpoint. Okay, so she's right, she's correct. This is the vocalization to call in pups. How do we know that? Because there's a difference in heaviness and pitter patters running through the woods. And these pitter patters went towards the vocalizations, and then we hear those same pitter patters, and then the larger, heavier pitter patter running away. Right.
Makes
So
sense.
then, right. So then we have, okay. So this is what mom is doing. Mom is calling. Okay. Okay. Boom. We have that. Right. Then we have others like call to action. There's a vocalization that I have, which I've shared in some other places. It's loud. Uh, I'd have to go back, but it's loud and intentional. So what happens after is when the dogmen are scattered about, like doing something or whatever they're doing, right? Because obviously from our point of view, we can't see what they're doing. But once, and we believe it's the alpha, once this call is done, the remaining dogmen around run towards this where the call was done, and then they all move out. Sometimes you'll hear whimpering in between, but eventually they all move out. So what I call is a call for action. So basically, it's like get your asses over here. I'm calling you. Let's go. Type of response. What we've seen, both seen and noticed is that normally it's a mom and dad and the pups. And even though the pups might be, a year or 2 years old, they might look big to us, but mentally they're still puppies, and they kind of act like pups. So they're still with mom and dad. It's like having a full grown, grizzly bear with her cubs. To you and us, so the untrained eye, that's a full grown grizzly, but in reality, it's still a cub.
So essentially, it's working like a wolf pack would.
Yes, yes. I call them clans versus packs, because in a lot of places where I started, actually in Wisconsin, a lot of the packs are run by a female, or at least the last one that says something is the female. Sometimes the female is larger than the males. So because of that, hyenas are called clans, and the hyena, the female, is the one that's the alpha. So that's where I got the word clan for them versus packs.
That works. That leads me into a whole lot of questions. I've got a list of questions that I've already started making.
No, there's a whole lot more.
All right, well, go for it, and I'll ask all my questions at the end.
Okay.
Not a problem. I'm sure everybody's got questions now.
The main one of the biggest questions about Dogman, right? And I'm going to tell you how we came up with this whole scenario, or not scenario, the theory behind it, and we kind of pretty much, prove that this is the reason why. Why do Dogman come to visit eyewitnesses? For the most part, there's different scenarios, but they're all in tune with the same thing: change of environment. So it was a cold February, and so at my house, I had looked at maps, looked at topography, pinpointed where different settings were at, pinpointed where we were at, and when we heard things. And to my mind, I said, okay, they must be here, right? And yes, I've been able to do that multiple places, pinpoint where exactly to go to get the best results based on specific information. So I went down to Illinois. I grabbed another team member, and we went driving around. And as we were driving around, now the day before it had rained, and then it froze back up again. So we get to a road that's next to a park. And so in that park, there's that boat launch. There's a little island off towards our right that's in the river. And so we parked where the boat launch was. We got out, and I didn't take anything. I didn't take parabolics. I didn't take, sonic ears, bionic ears, nothing. I just took my phone and we went out. So we started walking on the trail, and we found a track that we had found prior in that same park, which is very interesting to us, that particular track. But as we're going back, well, before getting to the track, my partner, my co-researcher, he walks with a cane, right? And normally it's just a big stick, not your average cane that you see people wear, not wear but use. He began to get like this funny feeling, like sick, right? And so I looked at him. Are you okay? Yeah. I just don't feel kind of right, but let's keep on going. So then we got to the track. As we're getting back from the trail, there's a ditch, and then there's just terrain. So I said, let me see if there's any prints around here, because it rained yesterday, so the floor must have gotten softer. And then it froze again, so it should have frozen any tracks that happened yesterday or the day before. So I'm going down there, I'm walking, and I'm looking down. All of a sudden, I look up, and when I look up, there's a head peeking out from this dry, tall grass type thing. And as soon as I picked up, I looked down and looked up again. I did a double take, and in the head, you can see that dry grass type thing move. And I started screaming at my co-researcher, behind me, look behind me. So now I have one hand, my left hand facing, my hand, because I'm now sideways, facing where I saw the other head, and I'm pointing behind me. I said, look behind me. Is there something behind me? And as soon as all of a sudden it was a silence, he goes, Rick, he's right there. He's right there. And all I said was, keep an eye on him. There's one in front of me. And he said, well, he's just standing there, but he's right there. He's right there. Now, I can't put much focus on the one behind me because I know there's one in front of me. So all of a sudden, you start hearing these popping sounds. What I would consider to sound like, imagine, I don't know if you've ever been to the tropics, right? Or even probably Florida probably has them. And the beach where the coconuts hit the ground and make this thump sound.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of those thumps, thump, thump. And they started going semicircles. So the guy behind me was rushing or running, and I semicircled to my other side, and the guy on my left side was running semicircles towards the right side. And they were flanking me / fanning me back and forth. So one would go the opposite direction, and the other one would go the opposite direction. So my co-researcher goes and says, you better get out of there, Rick. So I started walking backwards, and I got out. And now, as I'm walking out, I'm already a few feet from, the little ledge to climb up towards the trail. I am mad. I am mad because I don't have the parabolics to hear this properly. I don't have my recorder. I have nothing on me besides my phone. And as soon as I stepped and put my foot on that ledge, I told the guy, your partner of mine, says, forget this. I'm going back. I got to get something because this is BS. And I grabbed my phone. I put it on record on video, put it on my chest, and I walked back. And sure enough, I got an audio of one huffing at me. and I have a clear as day. I can send it to you later on. You know, he huffed. Um, and as soon as he huffed, my co-partner says, "There you go. You get that?" And yeah. And we head, I headed back. And then we sat in the car, and I'm like, "What in the world? Why? This is 1:30 in the afternoon. Why would so-called one of the most elusive creatures in the world be making vocalizations, huffing at me at 1:30 in the afternoon? Doesn't make sense to me. One thing that I will say is, from my point of view, I saw Holmes on my right side when this is going on. Why am I seeing Holmes? And at 1:30 in the afternoon, they're going nuts trying to get me out of here. They're not even care that people probably are in their porches hearing this commotion. Going with knowledge of animals, and basically I told my co-partner was, there's only one reason they would hijack their cover. And he goes, what? Pups. He looked at me, what do you mean? The only way they would sacrifice their cover is if they're protecting something very important. And that very important has to be pups. So he looked at me and goes, well, that kind of makes sense, because that's the only way. It's 1:30 in the afternoon. So knowing when Dogman kind of has their pups, it made sense. And I went back online, and by then I had a whole bunch of eyewitnesses that I talked to, on Messenger. And I went back and listen. Whenever you have been, in your situation scenarios, have you ever saw pups? And most of them normally saw their encounters around, June, July, for the most part, right? There's some others in, August, but for the most part, June, July. There was always some that were smaller than what I thought was the mom. That's what the response was. So bingo, pups. There's always one smaller when the activity happens. And then I begin to think, okay, so there's pups. But still, why would they, what would cause them to break their cover? The change in the environment in February was me. I was walking into something. Which later on we took a boat to the island. And that was a whole. We went looking for the for the den, and let's just say 3 of us got pushed out. We didn't even start. But so yeah, we got there, and this is a different time frame. It was in the summertime, and it started to rain. So they use noise to cover their noise, which even commercials, like if they're at your property, they'll wait until the commercial pops on to then move around the house. Because we all know commercials are louder than your normal program.
Makes sense.
So when the commercials go on, then they'll move. And when the commercial goes off, they stop. And then they wait for the commercial. But so we went on the island, and it started to rain. And I walked through a little entrance, and when I walked into the entrance, it opened up, and I was seeing something in front of me that was white and kind of black. And I looked down, so I'm trying to, get my footing and whatnot, and I looked up, and it was gone. And then as I looked up towards the right of me, I looked up. There's a bunch of feathers. Bird feathers on the trees, and I stopped, and I heard those pitter patters, the running on my right side, and my brain said, "Behind you, just look behind you." And I looked behind me and saw nothing, but then this whole pop sounds and you can hear them running again on the side. And I started calling my two other, co-researchers to get to my point. And they didn't get to me. We kind of met in the middle. And then when we met in the middle, they began to just make these noises and going around us. And it was raining. We couldn't quite, hear between the rain and the noises and the running. So we just decided to call the guy who had the boat to come pick us up. And we left. But going back to why Dogman comes to the property. So there's pups. We got that, right? I called every single eyewitnesses, and they confirmed that there's always pups around when their encounter happens. All of a sudden, my brain hits rewind, forward, rewind. And you remember the main episode about the family who got the night that the Dogman came to the property?
Are you talking about the Palmyra, Maine?
Yes.
Yeah, the dog pack or wolf.
Right. All of a sudden, that episode came straight into my brain, and it played vividly in my brain, looking for information. And I realized something, that I was right in what I was thinking. Dogmen make dens near homes when there's a change in the environment. They come out to figure out what's wrong, right? What's happening, because they have pups. If the eyewitness eventually doesn't care, they don't care, and everything kind of settles down. If the eyewitness acts stupid, the Dogman acts stupid. Why? Because there's pups around. So that episode, how that episode started, where was the change? If you notice the episode, which then happened to be true to everything else. The house hadn't been lived on for a while. The change was them arriving at this new house. The daughter and her boyfriend bumped into a soul-type den with a hole. Remember the two beagles went running and they stumbled upon a den?
Yep.
And they grabbed the dogs, whatever, went back to the house. The change. The house was not lived on for a while. These people come in, and on top of that, they're standing in front of our den that's next to the house. That sparked the situation where the Dogman came checking them out. And every single eyewitness, after I realized that there were pups at a specific time frame, I asked every eyewitnesses, have you ever found a den, a large mound, something that you thought may have been done by another animal in the property? And Robert, every single eyewitness told me yes. But they never explored it because they just thought it was probably a bear den or something. Or a coyote den.
That's
They never
really interesting.
They never went into it. So bingo. So then I asked I want everybody to understand this. I asked every eyewitness from East Coast to West Coast, what were changes? Now, obviously, most people, there was no changes, but I began to ask the hard questions. Were you going through a divorce? Did a family member die? Were your kids acting up? Drugs, alcohol, whatever. Every single one said yes to something. So what happens when you get a divorce? They're screaming, kids are crying, there's some more movement because now somebody's moving out the house. Kids who all of a sudden act dumb begin to have parties when the parents are not home. They drink, they smoke weed, whatever. Some of these kids now start talking back to their parents, which causes their parents to have anxiety, which causes more screaming and arguing in the house. Okay? A death in the family. Obviously, you'll have people visiting that home. more cars, more commotion. Okay, or there's a house that has not been lived in for a while, and the person has just bought the house or rented the house. Now, what happens every time we buy a new house or rent a new property? We normally start adding new curtains, probably fixing the door or whatever. We're doing some type of mowing the lawn or remodeling something. Well, that causes a change in the environment because those noises, those all these trucks coming in with your stuff has never been there before. And every single eyewitness had something similar to that. Now, how did I come to the conclusion that, and this is again, I'm going to use the word common sense, right? Do you own a dog?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've got two L counts.
Okay, so imagine, and even if you didn't own dogs and you know about animals, right?
Right.
If an animal, the only way that any wild animal, for that matter, right? But any animal, even including humans, the only way that a human or a creature, would leave their pups with the property owner, whether you're renting it or you live there all your life, the only way that you would leave your pups unattended and to frolic in the yard is if you knew that person. Because no living creature or humans would allow their offsprings or child to play or be in an area where the parents felt uncomfortable. Right?
Exactly.
So, right. So, when the situation goes back down, what has been happening and why the answers to are there pups in the property that every eyewitness says yes is because, and again, every single one of them, there's no difference. Everyone has said yes, right? It's because the pups are rather playing in the backyard or just running through the yard. So that leads you to believe that the parents must know the property owner long enough to understand that this person is not of menace or danger to my pups, to allow them to just be there running around doing pup crap. Including one eyewitness, right, who would leave the pup in the property and leave for a day or two. Then obviously that pup would come in and cause his havoc out of curiosity, right?
Right.
But then the parents would come back, 2 or 3 days later, and then the pup would disappear because the pup went back with the parents. But the only way that would ever happen in any scenario, whether you be human or an animal, is if you trust the person. If you don't trust the person, there's no way you would leave your offsprings there.
Right.
So that led to the conclusion that these dogmen had been living in that property for a period of time, enough to have grown a relationship with the property owner without the property owner ever realizing it.
That makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
And then that led to the whole bonding issue, because then other things happened, which I had to go into that one, right?
Right.
But that again, that's another 10, 15 minutes of that scenario, because pups will bond with your kids, if the parents allow it to. And I've had fathers call me up. They're rushing to their parents' house because, quote unquote, we have a dogman stalking their kids. And when you begin to ask the questions, and I say the questions because they're specific questions, the answers are always the same. And when there's the same, I always tell them, well, first of all, if it's during the daytime, mom is always in that crouched low position. She's not standing up like normal. So she's moving around left and right. She's going to be, squatted down. She's going to look like she's, prowling and hunting. It's not. She's just, that's the way every dog man walks in the daytime. Unless it's an active, like, I'm going to kill you or go after you type, then they get on two legs. But if it's a normal, relaxed scenario during the daytime, that's how they move. And this father, particularly this case, there's many cases like this, but this one, the grandparents were seeing a large dog man walking about like the cat about to pounce. And then when you ask certain questions and they're all the same, you realize that no, there are pups that are interacting with your kids. That's why your kids are missing things every so often. And this is why your kids are finding things in the yard that weren't there the night before. This is why your kids' toys are missing and show up someplace else in the property. This is why you leave your jacket in the front porch and you find it in the barn the next day. Because the pups are interacting with your kids, and your kids, without knowing, are interacting with their pups. And mom is just keeping an eye on everything.
That is
And then,
really, that is really cool.
once you explain it, and because the reason I have been able to, I want to use the word, convince parents to step back, right? And convince people, no, do this or that, is because I will unknowingly tell them what has been going on without them telling me. So once they say, well, you're telling me this and this happened, yes, that did happen. Okay. Did you have this and this happen? Yeah. Okay. Well, this is why this is happening. So because I'm telling them what's going on in their house without them telling me, then they're able to understand that, okay, he must know something if he's explaining to me what's going on in my property without him ever being here.
Right.
For instance, perfect example. This one was Massachusetts. So a biologist friend. So the biologist calls me up, and there's a dog man that's harassing the house, and the dog man is, breaking the shingles off the roof of the house. And so we start talking. And I asked for the topography of the area, the makeshift of the property, and she's giving it to me, et cetera, et cetera. And so she tells me that her son, the lady's son, has just moved into her house. His wife kicked him out. So that to me was interesting in itself. So she's telling me this, and I'm trying to ask her questions, and so I tell her, listen, the son must be doing something. The change is her son. The son must be doing something. Ask the mom if her son is using alcohol, drugs, or abusing her verbally, at least. Oh, I'm not going to ask her that. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, listen, Michelle, ask her these questions. That's are too personal. I'm not going to ask her that. If you don't ask her, I can't help you. Do you want my help? Yes, but I'm not going to ask that. Those are too personal. Michelle, I'll bet you my paycheck that the shingles that are coming off the roof are over this guy's bedroom. Find that out. And if I'm right, ask the mother. Well, Robert, guess what?
You're right.
I was right. It was tearing the shingles off the roof to get into the bedroom. That area was over the guy's bedroom. And yes, the guy was using alcohol, using drugs, verbally mistreating the mom. And he was throwing parties at the mom's house. And this dog man did not like that idea at all, especially when he's not been living there all this time. And so I told, the biologist, You gotta tell the mom if she wants it to stop now, her son got to go. And sure enough, her mom, because they're best friends, takes her son out. The second her son left, the bad activity left. The dogman she would see the dogman at the edge of the forest looking at her, and then he would walk back into the forest. That was it. That was simply it. So when I'm able to do that continuously throughout different scenarios, that's where people, I'm going to use the word lower their guard and allow me to help them understand them better. So then what happens is there's just a complete communication back and forth. And if there's a bond, if there's been a bond in that property towards the eyewitness or the landowner, that landowner, because the bond happens sometimes without the landowner knowing it. Even if the landowner shoots at the dogman and hits him, he can still repair that scenario without any, bad repercussions.
Right.
And again, what I'm saying is not a thought. I've done it. But those are, some of the things that has happened throughout my time. I continue to record, continue to put pieces together. I believe this is going to be a lifetime research for me. And it's just, there's a lot of things that has happened in which I believe Dogman is, and I've said this in certain groups, its genotype is cat, its phenotype is dog. So, for instance, a hyena looks like a dog, right?
Exactly.
But
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Right. But genetically, it's not a dog.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that Dogman does, including vocalizations. The fact that he climbs trees and perches himself on top of trees. The fact that the clicking sounds, they make certain clicking sounds that your domestic cat and other cats do with their mouths, are all things cats do, not dogs. And they also do other things that big cats do with their vocalizations, right? Mm-hmm. That no dog can do because the structure of a dog's vocal cords are built differently. And let that sink in. Dogman does vocalizations that big cats can do that dogs can't, because dogs' vocal cords are not structured like big cats.
Okay, so unfortunately right there is where we're going to cut part 1 of 2 for this episode. If you will, check into the next video and we'll finish up this interview. Thank you.
Whispers in the twilight, darkness and a breeze, shadows move in silence, mystery in the trees. Secrets in the